So they cut me off. But incorporating the voices into this channel and into this as part of the creative process, they don't want me to tell you what they're telling me, because then it's when you say it out loud, it sounds so irrational and so strange that it completely takes it out of reality. It becomes something that is irrational. But also what they admitted, and this is one of their true confessions, that when I was in the hospital, that would have been in 2023, they wanted to say that, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, everything was great, so that they could keep that higher status, like voice of God, like as though they used the word. I don't want to use that word because it might be connected to something in reality. I'm beginning to realize also that this is their way of sending their messages. But they said, "Oh, I realized that before," but they stopped, and now it's coming back. So I'm realizing it again. But the whole point is, in their true confession, they wanted to keep that higher level over me so that I would get used to their being able to say, "You're good, you're wonderful, you're great," and I don't want that either, because that's irrational too. When they were talking about that, well, how could they make it so that I would accept this? It's irrational. How can you accept something irrational? And I want to get into that. How do you accept something that is just irrational? Doesn't make any sense. They said, "Oh, stop saying that same word." That's what they are. You get what I mean? What happens if I don't stop saying irrational? Will something bad happen? That's what they would do. They would kind of make it seem like, if you don't stop saying the word irrational, then people will turn off your video, or people will think you're crazy, or this. So it goes from something like a criticism to something that's irrational. Meaning, if you might not like the fact that I have turmeric on my lips, does that mean then you're going to write a nasty comment and say, "Why do you have turmeric on your lips?" Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you wrote that comment, but what happens to me if I read that comment? Nothing. I would be okay. And partially what I'm trying to say is that if I had existed with this all the time, I would not have been able to function. I'm 51. At 51, it would have affected my life more than it did. They said that years ago, they were the ones that convinced me not to go to the gym, but I've been to the gym and exercise. They said, "Well, that was at when you were a flight attendant, but that's still going to a gym and exercising." So meaning we had gym in school. So meaning, how is that possible that I didn't do it if I did it? So they don't like when I do this, because it starts to make sense to people who understand that they didn't I can't really hear what they said. They didn't really achieve their goal. They failed. And did you guys hear that noise? It banged so much that it shook the floor. I don't know if you guys heard that or not. I don't know. At this point I don't know. But anyway, then they failed. So if you can say, all right, you've never been to the gym, but I have been to the gym. I don't have to even list how many times I've been to the gym, but I've been to the gym more than once. Then you failed. Then they said, well, you didn't ice skate. Yes, I have ice skated. So if you can look at something and say, you never did something, and I can say I did do that, then like they taught me you can't use the word never. If there's one exception, then I can look at the exception. Then they would say, well, one time doesn't count. Well, one time would count. So they said that they wanted to know every day of my life so they could put it and clone this AI, and then they could talk to me with my own voice and make it seem like it's synthetic telepathy. It wouldn't work at this point because they've changed your memory. Every time you tell a story, and this is something that, people who tell stories are good at, they change it a little bit. So even if you heard the same story, and a lot of us growing up, when I was growing up, we didn't have all this technology. So you just heard stories, and I'm sure people a lot older than me didn't have the technology I had, and they just heard stories. The good storytellers can change it a little bit. And if you remember everything, you're like, oh, that's not what you said before, or whatever. But it's interesting. It keeps the story interesting. But every time you go over a memory, you're changing it. So it's irrational for them to keep thinking that they can clone every day of my life at 51. when they would have to go over 51 years of stories and examples and things. And when they're talking about these situations and they're talking about it from another person's story, meaning they're taking someone else's memory, they're in essence cloning that person's memory. But also, it wouldn't be the same memory I have. We could both experience something and it would still be different because my experience of something would be different from that person's experience of something. So it's if the whole thing is irrational. It's not based on any reality. And if people thought that this was possible on the level that they wanted this to work, I'm wondering how did it work for them? And that's something I want to ask other people going through this. If you had synthetic telepathy, how did it work for you? Because I'm wondering why it doesn't work for other people who have synthetic telepathy. I think the fact that you know that you have synthetic telepathy means it's not working. Meaning they just said something, but I don't want to go into that. If you know you have voices and it's not your own voice, if you